said, what did you expect? Got no time to waste, act like we never met. Only fooling yourself, baby. I got no room for maybes, been holding back lately. Just because you let me get into your heart, and just because I let you get into my heart, ain't gonna give you what you want, but I could tell you what you need to hear. Just gonna get the same response, taking you up cause you just made it clear. Ain't gonna give you what you want right now, want right now, want right now. Ain't gonna give it to you, no. Ain't gonna give you what you want, gonna give you the run around. We did this backfire, you gonna work it out. Gotta make a choice, if it ain't me, I'm out. Better show up for this, baby. Oh, cause if you ain't real, don't know what I'm about. Saying, just because you let me get into your heart, and just because.
And welcome everybody to Don't Be Cinderella with your wonderful hosts and great lady of all times. We have Rowena with a super guest tonight, the author herself, Miss Nova.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rowena Kuo, and welcome to Don't Be Cinderella. And this is the show where we talk about what it's like to have a rags to riches story, or tell me your Cinderella story. Not everybody has a Prince Charming or a fairy godmother. How did you get yourself out of that situation, and how did you create your own future? On the show today, we have our great Odin, who is our fearless leader and web producer. And we have author Nova McBee, who is an avid traveler and culture nerd, who has lived in and worked in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia for half her life. She speaks multiple languages, including Mandarin, and lived in China for more than a decade. She thrives on complex adventure, making cross-cultural connections, and coffee. She currently resides in the beautiful Pacific Northwest and 3 children. Her book, Calculated, is currently in development to become a major motion picture. Emmy Award-winning screenwriter Anne Peacock, especially known for The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, will adapt Calculated for the screen. Welcome, Nova.
Thank you, Rowena. I'm very happy to be here.
So tell us about yourself. How did you get your start?
How did I get my start? So if we're talking about becoming an author, I didn't actually know I wanted to be an author until I was in my late 20s. So that is something that I love, because different dreams happen at different times. And it's almost never too late to start a dream. And I love that I've met, just in the last couple months, so many authors who became authors in a second career. They had a first career and then they became an author later on in their life. And I love that, because I feel like I've been doing all of my different dreams as they come along. And it wasn't that I had to be an author from when I was a child dreaming about it. I would say growing up in my family was always really creative. My dad loved telling fantasy stories. He wrote tons of little kid stories, and he was always creating fantastical worlds around us. So I grew up in a very creative home where creativity was really encouraged. And so I wrote tons of poetry, songs, stories, but I had no clue that being an author was even a job you could have. And I tell this to people often. I'm like, it's, you're taught in school, you have to apply for a job. You have to fill out, you fill out forms to go get a job. So that's like an author, you don't do that. It has to come from within you, and you have to do it without anyone asking. That you can't apply to be an author. And so I didn't know that I wanted to actually do that. I was really, from a young child, I knew I loved languages and culture, and I was around that my whole life. My mom is a dual citizen of another country and the US. So I was around languages and culture my whole life. I just knew that was going to be a part of what I studied, and it was. And then I ended up living abroad. But yeah, back to becoming an author, I don't even think I was an avid reader until my 20s. And so that's another thing to tell parents, because like some people are like, oh, my kid doesn't even like books. I'm like, don't worry, because there's actually a time when I was like hungry for words and something just switched and I started devouring books and words. So, and then, yeah, like I said, in my late 20s, I was like, I want to write books. I want to write good books. I want to write books that can go all over the world and like that can talk about this and this and this and this. And so then I started writing books. So that's kind of my origin story, I guess.
Now you mentioned prodigies. You have a prodigy in your story.
Yeah.
And how did you come up with that?
Okay, that's fun because she's a math prodigy. And like I said, I'm very creative. I studied international relations, languages, and, you know, it was a international politics degree. It was a political science degree. And my, yeah, so it did not require math is what I'm getting at. I did not do math in college. I totally forgot a lot of it. And so, but when I was writing this story, I knew that my main character had to have something she had to have a gift that could be beneficial to a lot of people. And it could do things that other people couldn't do. And this story is set in modern day Shanghai and Seattle. It's like a contemporary story. So she couldn't have magic or whatever, you know, she couldn't have this fantastical element. It had to be grounded in real life. And so I was like, okay, she has to be a math prodigy because she has to be able to solve some huge economic problems in the world. And so when I decided she had to become a math prodigy, I had no clue what that would require at the moment. And it was way harder than I thought. Now I'm by the third book, I'm kind of into her character, but I did a ton of research on real life prodigies, which was fascinating because when you start digging deeper, we have amazing prodigies all over the world that can do things that actually feel like fantasy. And they go beyond what we think is normal and actually realistic for our world. And that was such a journey that I loved. And so I was like, look at these amazing people, you know? And so I was like, just taking notes on the different things that I learned about. And then I started to say, what does her math gift need to do and look like? And so because I'm an author, you use your imagination, which is amazing. It's like a job that you get to use your imagination. That's amazing. So I was like, okay, I have this image and I'm using my imagination for what she can do. So what disciplines of math can actually fit with that? And I had to do a ton of research to figure out. And honestly, because I hadn't studied math in a long time, I was like rereading and I'm like, what? I didn't get any of that. So I'd have to like reread. Like, you know, I'm talking like mathematical concepts that are so like no one talks about. And all of a sudden I'm like training my mind to like figure out Newton and, you know, all these big mathematicians. I can't tell you how many mathematicians that I read about. Through this process, not only did I become smarter because I learned a whole bunch of stuff that I never knew, but I also fell in love with math and how amazing math and science are and how they just point to so many amazing things in this world, which is why book 2 goes into fractals and then all the hidden light behind the electromagnetic spectrum that's all around us and just incredible, you know, math and all these scientists throughout history that have really pushed the limits into seeing what is not physically there, but they know is there and having to prove it. It's just so inspiring. So that's originally, I just knew my character had to have a gift. And then book 2 launched into her working with a bunch of other prodigies, which I kind of say sometimes it was torture because I'm not a prodigy, but then all of a sudden I had to create these like super smart people. And so again, it goes back to creativity and imagination and a ton of research. And and I love it. I love all of these prodigies. And I actually got to talk to real life prodigies and ask them a ton of questions. What was it like growing up in that school with other, was there competition? How did you feel? Did you feel different? Did you need to talk, who did you need to talk to as a kid, as a prodigy? And so that was really fun research as well. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yes. No, I mean, I like what you said about having to do a lot of research. Oftentimes, if we don't know something, we got to go find out.
Yeah.
In order to write about it.
Research?
So you did a lot of traveling, and how did you integrate that into your books?
Oh, yes. Good question. That's my favorite. So yeah, I did a lot of traveling. Like I said, my mom is a dual citizen of another country, and we grew up even hosting exchange students and stuff, this great love of languages. And so actually living abroad, I got to live, like you already mentioned, in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. So I have 3 very different places in the world. And of course, every place within those places is different too. And you can't know that until you actually go there. And you're like, whoa, China is not just China. It's actually like tons of different minorities all mixed in. They have all different languages, dialects everywhere, and every place is different. Every city is different. Every city has different food. And so you start to kind of, after 20 years of living abroad and going to a ton of places, you kind of figure out you just had amazing adventures. Like I have amazing adventures tucked into my belt, all over the world, and exciting ones, dangerous ones, risky ones, and ones that have like just shaped me as a human, that I can't regret a moment of my life, because I've met precious people everywhere, whether they had dirt as the floor in their house or marble at the top of a skyscraper. It's like the range of beautiful people that I've met everywhere and have shared meals with and had conversations with and adventures with. It's just beautiful. And that's like a huge part of my life. So how could I not integrate that? And yet I'm like this Mission Impossible type fan, where I just love adventure. And like, to be a person like me, to go to all those places, you have to have a little bit of riskiness in you. And so just adding those Mission Impossible elements to the already person that I am and the adventures that I had, it was so much fun. It was just so much fun to do, because I want to take everybody to where I've been and have them experience what I've experienced. And some of the funnest things about these books is people are like, wow, I feel like I am there with you. Like I have been to Tunisia now, or like I want to go, and I have been to Finland, and I have been to China, and I'm there. And what a beautiful part of the culture that you brought. And one thing that I love doing is honoring like the best part of the culture and just showing people what I love about that. And it's like, my goal is like, of course I want to entertain them with my book, but if I can get them to be like, wow, I really want to go to that place, what a fantastic country, then I'm also like, this is a major win. Because I've just loved everywhere I've been. And yeah, so, and I feel like when I read reviews, which I don't always, but when I do, and people are like, wow, how she wrote that country, I want to go there, and this is, that's really like, that's a compliment to me. And people ask me, how do you do your research for those countries? I'm like, well, that's kind of like cheating, because I've actually been there. So what you're reading is like my real life takeaway on what that smelled like, tasted like, felt like, sounded like, how I woke up, and what I saw around me and experienced. And so of course I do research as well, but a lot of those are drawing from my own experiences.
So what was it like writing while you were traveling, or did you do more, you're traveling first and then you started writing about it?
So like I said, I lived abroad since I was a teen, and I always wrote my stories, even my own real adventures, in journals. Like I am a journaler, and I just dream. I'm a dreamer. So I'm always dreaming up these really fantastic things. But when I really knew I wanted to write novels, I was still living in China, and my first book calculated, here I can show you guys. My first book calculated is set in China. And so that was really fun to write Calculated while living in China, because I could have my Chinese friends. I could ask, oh yeah, yeah, Calculated. So it was fun to write it. I wrote it while I was there. So sometimes I actually lived in a different city to Shanghai, but I did go to Shanghai several times. And I retraced the different steps that I wrote, and got to have some really fun, like just more imagination. And, that's fun when you get to write a book in its own setting. And of course, I'm from Seattle, so the books are always set in Seattle and some other country. Not everyone gets to go to the country that they're writing to. But however, I did just have an opportunity to go to New York for the International Thriller Awards. And I met several other writers who also do the same thing. When they are writing a book, they go and, like, one guy, he just got back from right before the war. He was living in Ukraine and wrote a spy novel set in Ukraine. And he was living there for 3 months while he did it. So I'm not the only one out there that's doing that.
So just immerse yourself in the culture that you're writing about.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dream, right? Because I'm like, I never want to stop engaging other cultures. I never want to stop traveling and taking my kids there too. I want my kids to love other cultures and countries and learn about them. So I hope I can continue writing books and going to other cultures and countries.
So when you started writing, did you know it was going to be a series, or did that just kind of develop along the way?
That's a really good question too, because I thought Calculated was going to be a standalone. It was really hard to do. It was my very first novel. And I polished it. It took me 2.5 years to write and another year to polish, after getting feedback from different readers and different agents and stuff like that. And it was so hard to get the math right and the complexity, because I knew I was like, if I'm going to write a prodigy, I can't have a simple plot. Do you know what I mean? You can't have like this a simple thing that anyone could figure out. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, why do you need the prodigy if anybody can figure that out? So you have to have something very complex. Well, that took me a long time to think about. So the whole story took me a long time, and I finished it as a standalone. And there were a couple factors that made it a series, it's just amazing how one thing can lead to another. But while I was querying this book, sending it out to different agents to see if they would represent me, one British agent, she wrote back, she requested the full right away, read the full, loved the full manuscript. But she came back and she said, I can't take you on right now, but I'm writing you back because I think this story has really huge potential. And she said, but there are a couple things that you need to do. You need to make it a little bit shorter. It was very long. She's like, you need to cut 20 or 30,000 words. And I was like, oh my word, I don't even know how to do that. And then she said, one of her critiques was, you didn't leave this book open-ended. And I think it needs to be open-ended. And I hadn't thought about that before. And I really respected her. And I loved everything that she said. And most things resonated with me. Whenever you get feedback, you have to make sure it really does resonate with your vision, and everything was really good. And I said, okay, so how can I do the things that she's actually talking about? Because they give you advice. They don't tell you how to do it, right? So you have to think about it. And because of her, I had one small idea on how to open the story at the end. And it opened several threads. And it was funny because I was talking about it with my husband, and he was like, ooh, what about this? Just that one small detail. Well, that one detail ended up being nothing like what my husband intended, but completely launching in a whole different direction, which then made book 2. And book 2 was then my favorite of all time until I wrote book 3, which then is now my favorite of all time. So the other factor was I didn't write that, but I had those small ideas. And then when I met the movie producers, they read book 1 and they were instantly sold on it. They called me right away, asked a request with my agent. It didn't even have a publishing deal at this point. They knew that. We were actually still getting it ready for submission. And, but then they said, hey, this book, this character that you've created, she's so original. She's so unique and powerful. We think she's a character that people are going to want to follow. And we think this has franchise potential. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I was like, no, they're like, we think that you should write more in the series. Do you have any other ideas? And I was sitting here going, no, because it was really hard for me. I was like, it was the hardest book. The second book that I wrote after this in another series, I wrote very easily in like 8 months. And, it just didn't cause me all the problems that this book did. These are so complex. They have so many layers. They're so fast paced and intense and complex. And there's depth and all these different types of characters going on, and there's saving the world. And it's just so, they're big stories. So anyway, I was like, oh no, I don't think I could do it. And he's like, no, we really think you should think about those other ideas, and don't give us an answer yet. But if you want to write those, we think we want to make them. We want to make this. We talked about it as a team, and we think this should be a franchise. Well, how do you say no to that? You're like, I'm going to seriously consider that. And so I went back and I talked about it with my husband, and I looked at my old ideas, and then more ideas started to flood into my mind. And I was like, oh yeah, I actually could do this. And so it was really like the belief of other people in me that really spurred me forward. The agent was like, this is a good book. And she used a phrase that I will never forget, because when you're querying and getting rejected like several hundred times, she was like, your book stands above the crowds. And I was like, okay, I will never forget that. You need to hear those things in the midst of rejection, and they kind of urge you forward. But her belief in the book and saying leaving it open-ended is good for you because you don't know what's going to come. And it was her belief in that. And then the producers that really are why these other books exist, and like I said, I love each successive book more than the other one. And so do all the readers. And so I'm just like, wow, what a blessing that, when you speak, faith into other people, it really does matter.
So you had mentioned that the original agent that you went to couldn't take you on at the moment. The last show we had an agent on. How did you find your agent? Was it the same person or is it somebody different?
Nope, it's somebody different. So I did query for about 2.5 years. So you can imagine, I'm pretty, talking about Cinderella, don't be a Cinderella. I worked really hard and I have to. I don't come from anything grandeur, but I did come from a family that taught me how to work hard and taught me how to do things for myself. I had a dad who was like, okay, if you're going to own a car, you should know how to fix a car. And he taught me how to change my oil and the belts. And he taught me how to get under a car and read the manual and fix it myself. And he thank God for my dad. My dad was amazing. He'd be like, all right, if your brother can ski down this mountain, so can you. And I'm like, okay, let's do this, And so, again, it goes back to people believing in you and your parents believing in you. And it's like, that makes you think you can do anything. You've got this, you can do it. It's hard, but you can do it. And so it was like, when I was querying for 2 years, getting all these rejections, I was like, I don't care. I know I'm supposed to be an author. I'm going to keep going. And it is a battle. And some people do give up because it sucks to hear no over and over again. But if you really believe in what you're doing and where you're meant to be, like, you got to press through that. And for me, I loved that process because it only solidified how much more I knew I was gonna be an author and how important it was to me and to everything else. And so I just kept cold querying. I didn't know anybody in the industry. And that's the only way. If you don't know anybody, you have to do it that way. And that's like less than 1% that actually get an agent through cold querying. And here's the funny part. It was from the other book that I wrote. It wasn't even from Calculated. It was my second book that I wrote. And I got an agent through that book. And then like a month later, these producers call about Calculated. And she's like, wait, what? What are you talking about? You like, what other book? And I'm like, oh, I wrote a book called Calculated. And these producers had asked to read it through another producer that I actually knew and from China. And, there's no harm done when somebody's like, hey, I think these producers might be interested in your book. You don't have anything to lose at that point. So you're like, go ahead and read it. I've been rejected so many times. Like, it doesn't matter. No. And so everyone decided, once we had the talk with the producers and we were kind of in motion for contracts, then we did get a publisher. Eventually, we also had to go through a long submission process with publishers. And then the publisher read both of the books, the first two of two different series, and everyone agreed, no, Calculated is a big story. It needs to come out first. We need to get this and the whole series out first. So I set the other book down and we went out with Calculated. And yeah.
So you got the agent through Simulated or a different series altogether?
A different series altogether. Yeah.
Oh, what's that series?
That series is not published yet. So we put that one down because I got my book through a book called The Never Vows, which I really hope everyone will read one day. But like I said, she signed me on that book, and then we found out Calculated has film interest. So everybody was like, well, we're going to put this book out first. And it is a bigger book. It is far more global. It hits a wide audience. Never Vows is very much a young adult teen book. It's going to hit a teen audience. It's not going to go, people will enjoy it. But Calculated, this is I'm discovering how wide the audience actually is. It's like from 80 to 10 years old. Like I get messages from 11, 12, 13, 14, all the way up. Middle-aged men have read my book and messaged me. They've read it in a day. So I have a lot of middle-aged men, which was an unexpected demographic. And I kind of joked with my agent. I was like, apparently I write for middle-aged men, because there were so many reading it at that point and giving me such great feedback. But then there's also the middle-aged women and their daughters reading it, and their sons and whole families. And then grandmas were messaging me. So I was just like, wow, the range of like really young teens. I thought, the age would be 15 to 40, because I think people like those books, like Hunger Games. It's kind of like, yeah, kind of it stretched across a wide audience. And that was actually my hope for this book. I Calculated. I was like, no, I want this to have a wide audience. And now it is. And so where the other book has a much narrower audience. So I'm actually really glad we went out with this series first. Yeah.
Very nice. So that's a great story. So you got contracted through an agent from a totally different series.
Yes.
And you haven't sold that series yet.
We have interest, but we haven't sold it.
Yes, you have interest, but you haven't sold it. And then how did Activated come about, the third book?
So the publisher signed me for 3 books, right? Because I said I had 3 ideas. And this is funny too, because the producers, One Door Studios, they actually wanted me to have 3 sequel ideas. And I'm like, I only have 2 sequel ideas, right? So a trilogy altogether. And I just could not imagine myself writing 4 books in this series. I couldn't. I was like, I don't think I'm smart enough to write 4 books in this series. It's so complex, right? And but they actually said, we hope for 4. And I had completely forgotten that, because I was so, sort of set on the 3 that I signed with my publisher. And so I knew I would write 3 books in the series. But while I was finishing book 2, Simulated, I was I mean, and these deadlines were close together. They were killing me. They were definitely too close together for me, killing my brain. And but at the end of Simulated, I had a very good idea. I don't know if it was a great idea, but I mean, it was a good idea. It was something that I loved and I knew had to happen. And my idea for the last book, I knew had to be pushed out because I had an idea for the third book that had to happen first, which is Activated. So I wrote that knowing that my final idea was uncontracted, actually, because I had to have this happen in between. And that's why I think people really love Activated. It's like the series kind of explodes once you lay this foundation and calculate it. I mean, it's good, but it just gets series. I've discovered series, if you do it well, they get deeper, more powerful, more intense, and everybody's so much more attached, right? And it just kind of pushes you in so much deeper. And by the third, everyone, it was just like, wow, like Calculated was good, but oh my word, Simulated was even better. And oh my word, Activated, and just give me the last book. And that was fun for me to hear, because I feel like it's just, you get to go deeper and know your characters more and see different sides. Like everybody was so excited. So now my original third idea is now my fourth idea. So I had to, of course, pitch it to the publisher. And they had to agree, and we had to write a new contract for a fourth book, which we did. And then I got to tell my producers there was a fourth idea, and they were like, yes, because they have loved each book as they've come out and optioned them as they've come out. And they're just huge fans and huge supporters, which is great, because my agent told me something early on, when we were looking for publishers. And she's like, you want to work with people who love your work, who really love your work, and not somebody who's like, oh yeah, I think I can sell this, or, it's good, maybe we want to change it a lot, or like, how can we like, she's like, no, we want to work with people who really love your work because they will champion you. And that has been true from the very beginning. Like the publisher has loved my books and they have wanted to champion those. And the producers have loved my books and wanted to champion it.
So what was it like working with your publishers? Was it a small press or a big press, or what kind of publisher do you have?
I have a small press called Wise Wolf Books. But it's the imprint of Wolfpack Publishing. And Wolfpack Publishing has been like on all of the Amazon best publishing companies of the last 5 years. I can't remember all the things, but they've been nominated one of the best publishers, digital publishing houses. Like, I can't remember all the numbers, but they've been they're really successful and they're really well known. And in that world. And then one of the associate publishers within Wolfpack had a dream to start a YA imprint, a young adult imprint. And they had been kind of looking for a title strong enough to launch the imprint. And they were looking around for over a year, and they didn't really feel like they found the one until they read Calculated. So I actually helped launch their young adult imprint, which is Wise Wolf Books. And that's really cool for me because, again, it goes back to the hard work, that my mom and dad instilled in me. And I was just like, wow, I want to see, it's like, yes, I get to help start this thing. And how can I help this grow apart from my books? And so that was actually really exciting for me. Originally, my idea was to go with a big 5 publisher, and that didn't work out. But I've actually found more teamwork, more partnership, more collaboration in this smaller press. And I love it. They're flexible. They get to try new things. I bring them ideas and they're like, yeah, let's try it. And they actually say they're like, we are a publisher, but we're actually more a marketing company because we never stop marketing your books. We're going to market them until you die. I'm like, well, who, like big 5 publishers don't say that, so it's actually finding a true partnership. And this is also cool. it's kind of like a brag moment, but for my publisher as well, because my book was nominated for the International Thriller Awards for Best Young Adult. And that's, thank you. I was the only one out of all the awards from a small press. The only one. All of the other ones were from big five, big, well-known publishers. And a lot of them were already New York Times bestsellers. And I'm just like, and there's me. But my publisher came and he was like, I'm really proud of you. He's like, Wise Wolf or Wolfpack. He's like, it's the only small press up there. And it was just such a cool moment. You know, it was like, yeah, because good work should be recognized no matter where it comes from. You know, it doesn't need to have this big publishing house to be recognized as a good piece of work. So that was a good moment.
When I first met you, you had your books in a baby stroller.
Yes.
and like a bunch of us were oohing and ahhing at your book baby.
It is such a great analogy because every book, it does take a birthing process. And oh yeah, I love that. Great way to carry your books. If you have boxes of books. Yes.
So working with the small publisher, what did you actually, for marketing, what did you actually have to do? Did they ask you to, what sort of things did they ask you to do?
What sort of things did they ask me to do? You know, like I said, I kind of found a gem among publishers. I really did. Because at first they were like, you don't have to do anything. Just write the books. Just make the books great. And I'm like, this is a dream, you know, but, you know, of course I want to do all I can too. And they're like, yeah, great. If you can be on social media and that kind of stuff. But we actually collaborated on making a marketing plan together. And we wanted to find out what was most strategic, what worked, what didn't work. And I had my ideas that they were, you know what, completely willing to try, which is so great. And we tried them all. We found out what worked, what didn't. They already had their own marketing strategy, which they were already going to do. And they're very confident in how they sell books. And they've been great. And they're still doing it. They're still marketing my books in all different kinds of ways. They're still looking for new ways. And I wouldn't say that my book exploded like all these other big five, you know, publishers that have national distribution and they can get all these humongous promotions. That's not what happened. But what they did is they established credibility of my books. And it's like the little train that could, you know, it's just like slow and steady, but it's still getting visibility. It's still being discovered. It's still being purchased. More libraries keep buying it along the way, more schools, more readers. And so I think that's really how something grows, you know? And like I said, we had a plan and we're still doing it and it's working. So, and when something doesn't work, we come back together and find something else that we can try. So I've been part of that process. My agent has been part of that process. Their entire team has been part of that process. And it really does feel, when you work as a team, it does feel better. You don't feel like you're alone, you know, fighting for your books by yourself. So.
And what did you have to do as far as legwork? Did you have to ask to be on blogs? Did you have to go to bookstores? What did you?
I didn't go to bookstores necessarily, but I did email libraries, you know, alerting them of my book. I did reach out to different podcasts and blogs and bookstagrammers to see if they'd be willing to read my book in exchange for, you know, a review and or books in exchange for reviews, or were they interested in interviewing me? So I made a list of a ton of different bookstagrammers that I liked. And I basically made a list of all the things that I wanted to reach out to that necessarily my publisher didn't necessarily want to do. We kind of designated what I would do and what they would do. And so I did what I was meant to do.
Nova, we lost you're on mute.
Can I have a minute? Sorry, my child is here. Yeah,
so it's great that you've taken really your book and just driven it all over the place and marketed it, and you're just so enthusiastic about what you're doing. I'm just so glad to have met you. That you're so vibrant and
Thank you.
willing to be out there and just show yourself and show your books.
Thank you so much.
What sorts of things do you think you would have done differently? Or do you think everything fell into place exactly the way they were supposed to?
That's really an interesting question. Every author thinks they have an idea of how they want it to go, and mine didn't necessarily go that direction. But like I said, it ended up being exactly what I needed, and I actually appreciate this journey so much more. And, I had the plan of going the Big Five route, and instead I got this route, but I also got true partnership. What I would have done differently, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I did all that I could, and I did all that I could. I really did. I did get an agent offer before my other one, and felt like, oh no, I want to say yes to this because it's my first agent offer, but then it felt wrong. And so I had to say no, and that was hard. And I looked back at that and said, yeah, that was the right decision. And so sometimes when I look back at things that I thought were really hard and difficult at the time, I'm now saying, yeah, those were the right decisions. I would definitely say relax more. There were a few times where I was like, oh, this needs to happen right now, and why isn't it? And just like, I think I would have just relaxed more and just played it out and saying, no, I know there's like a perfect time. I worked really hard to make things happen where I could have just sat back and chilled for a while, and it still would have happened, actually.
So other than writing, what else do you do? Do you do another job outside of writing?
Not at the moment. I homeschool my children as well, so that's sort of a job in itself. And I have been teaching at writing conferences and doing writing workshops, and so that has been really fun for me. And I still travel, and yeah, I'm still active in other stuff that I do. I run writing programs, and I'm now learning about screenplays and working with other screenplay writers. And so I think I'm just besides writing my books, which takes a long time, I think my books and my kids are my top priority. And then anything after that, I'm just learning more about the writing world and the film world.
When adapting your story from book to screenplay, you're taking a 300 some page book and condensing it into 2 hours. What is that process like? Have you spoken to the person who's adapting your book?
Yes, we had a great initial call, and we've had contact via email since. That was hard for all of us because no one wanted to cut a single scene, right? No one's willing to cut anything because everybody loves each scene, which is great. I tried to write such a tight book where there was and this is one of the things my producer says, he's like, there's no fluff in the entire book. There isn't something that's just happening to happen, nothing. So how do you cut something like that? Well, it's really difficult to figure out how to capture the entire story, the entire depth, all the scenes in 2 hours. And she, I haven't seen it. I'm supposed to see the script any day now, actually, the first draft, I should say. We talked about how we can capture some scenes in very specific key images so that it can portray a point visually, because in a book you need words to convey those, but some scenes can be done visually in a minute. You know what I mean? So we did talk about certain scenes where it's like, okay, this scene can be shown visually and it will totally convey the point that you're making. So that was one way that we talked about. And I will say that Anne Peacock, she's really incredible mind. Always taken on really amazing projects with a lot of depth, which is why I was so happy that we signed with her. She said it took a little while to figure out how to get going, but once it did, she couldn't stop. And so that's good to hear. She's like, it's clicked, just like getting the story out. And so then she was really excited, and she's since read Simulated. I sent her Activated, I'm not sure, but she even, has the right in the contract, the first right to write all of the books. So, and I really hope she does, because once you're in a character's head and you really feel the flow, it's easier to have one writer on a project than, you've seen those movies where the second movie is like totally different than the first, and you're like, yikes, this is not good. So I hope she does.
You ever considered maybe doing like a web series, or like a TV series even, or a mini series?
So we talked about that. That was an option. We all discussed that as a team, of the production team that they have and the screenwriter. And we talked to other people, in the Hollywood sphere that were considering doing these films as well. And there were a couple suggestions like, yeah, series would be great, because then you can go anywhere. Which was also cool to hear. The other different people in Hollywood, they were like, this book is a director's dream. I was like, what? Really? Awesome. Again, tucking that in my back pocket for a rainy day when you're feeling bad about writing. Pull back all those little things that people say. But in the end, when we discussed it with Anne Peacock, she was like, no, this needs to be an experience. She's like, the book is so powerful that you walk away changed. And she's like, if you drag it out in a series, that experience isn't going to be felt like, boom, she's like, this needs to be a 2 to 3 hour movie where it hits like a bomb and people walk away changed.
So what feeling did you have as you realized that this was going to become a movie? How did that feel?
That was really awesome. First of all, when people believe in your work and they think, hey, this story is worth telling, this isn't your characters are worth knowing about, following. That was such an amazing feeling to have people besides your family and your friends say, this is a story the world needs. And even Anne Peacock, she was so awesome. She's like, I read books all the time. And she's like, people send me a lot of books to make into a film. And she's like, but I can't get behind any project that I don't believe in. And she's like, and I believe in this. This is a story the world needs to hear. And that was so incredible to me. It was just, and then the fact that other people now are taking their jobs, their lives, and their time to create something that you created, and so that's incredible. And definitely I've had my fair share of tears of joy and awe and thankfulness and gratefulness, and then even, the producers, they actually did these kind of teaser promo clips, not the real actors, but just for their investors. And when I even saw those 1-minute clips that they did of scenes in the book, I was like, oh my word. I think I was like, my face was plastered with this humongous smile. I was laughing for like 10 minutes. I just like couldn't even get over the fact that I was like, it's coming to life in a brand new way. And how excited I am to share these characters with the world. And wow. I mean, it's still, I don't even think I comprehend it, because it's not totally there yet, but every step, I'm trying to celebrate every step of the way. Because, there are, the dreamers in Hollywood too are like, hey, it's going to be huge. It's going to be amazing. And then the other ones are like, and by the way, it might never get made at all, so you gotta celebrate each step of the way. Cause there's been a lot of, I have a lot of talented author friends who got their films optioned and it went all the way to development and then was tossed, and so even them, they're like, hey, celebrate every step of the way. And right now, this is going all the way. You know, I'm so confident they have all that they need to make it to the end. There's no doubt in my mind, you know, unless there was like something crazy to happen to stop it, you know. But yeah, it's going well right now. So I'm enjoying every step of it.
So did any characters have to be eliminated in the process of converting it from a book to a movie, or are all your characters represented?
I have yet to know. I don't know yet. We talked about eliminating a very, very minor character. Very minor. Still significant in the sense that the main character knows her well, but still minor enough. So I don't know. I'm very interested to read the script. Like I said, I'm supposed to get a chance to read it in the next couple weeks. And so that's when I really find out. Yeah, yeah, it's just a little, you know, I'm a little nervous what it's going to look like. So
having been an associate producer and executive producer on some films myself, how did you get funding, or how are you going to be getting funding?
Oh, that's really a unique question, and actually a great chance. So people, even normal people, I don't know what that normal means, but any average person that's not in the film world is what I mean, has a chance to invest in these films. During COVID period of time was really interesting for everybody. So actually, but a lot of cool things came out of it. A lot of people were like, hey, how can we do things differently? And this was the first time my producers have been in the film world for 30 years, really producing things the traditional way, having, you know, a couple big investors and going all these different routes where there's actually a lot of control over that. And so they heard about, you know, this different form of investment, and some other people in Hollywood were trying it, actually quite a few. And they were like, well, why don't you do like these, it's not, what is it? It's basically, I mean, it's an investment platform. So people can invest in your stuff before the movie is made. And there, with at least how my producers are doing it, it's the money is actually guaranteed back with 110%. And so they were like, they approached us because this is all during COVID. Everything's shut down, you know? So I'm so excited to sign with them. Everything's like, we're going to go for it. And then COVID shuts everything down. We're like, well, we're on hold for a while, you know? And then they call us up. They said, hey, we've been talking with these guys who have done this WeFunder investment platform. They're like, what do you think about that? And my agent and I were like, what is that? You know, is this like crowdsourcing or what is that? You know? And they're like, no, it's actually an investment platform. And they explained it to us and they said, we actually kind of think we want to try it with just your film. I'm like, oh my word. And so again, we were like, okay, well, you know what? Nothing's going on with COVID, just go for it. And this is the first time they've ever done anything like that with any of their films. And I will say they absolutely loved it. They got all of their development money within like 8 months. I mean, a couple $1 million within 8 months. Everybody in the platform was like, whoa, that was really fast. How did you do that? And not just that, they actually got all their financing through these investors. And actually it created a new fan base, which was also awesome, but it also created all these different kinds of partners who all people were like, well, hey, guess what else? Like now I'm so excited about this project, being part of this project. And it's anywhere from like, you know, the person, you can start as low as $100 because they're like, well, if we're going to do this, we want to open it up to anyone. So like, what if anyone could have invested in the Hunger Games? Look at where they would have been now. They're like, $100 is nothing. So why don't we open it to the average Joe who's like, why not? Like instead of a stock or whatever, let's invest in this movie. And if it becomes the Hunger Games, well, yay. You know, so, and they were like, you know, this is fun. And it became fun. And they got to meet a ton of people. And then I got to meet a ton of people. They're like, people contacting me and being like, I'm an investor in your movie and I just read your book and I love it. And it actually was like a super fun thing. And so they got all the money that they needed and more, actually, kind of beyond, above and beyond what they needed. And they were like, this happened to be the most enjoyable process I've ever had in Hollywood, because also now they have total control over everything that they're doing. They don't have anyone else, they don't need to go to anyone else. And so that was extremely awesome. I'm not savvy on all the ways that Hollywood works, but when you're dipping into all these different hands on a project, that's why a lot of them don't get made. There's too many people trying to control a thing going on. So I've heard, I don't know. But anyway, they just now opened the investment for the sequels. So anyone can invest in those too. And they keep it open for a certain amount of time. So it will close, just like calculated close. They said, hey, we have this amount of opening, take it, and it will close at this point. And so, the sequels just launched. It's a WeFunder. If you were interested, you can find it under calculated sequels. And yeah, it's been really fun process for my producers.
Okay, my turn. I gotta come in now. My throat's a little bit clearer. Had to walk out, take a deep breath. You know the deal. Now, there are many books that have sequels to it that do make very good movies. Stephen King is for one. Raymond E. Feist, who's one of my old friends. I also know Stephen, but Raymond E. Feist is one of the biggest ones. He's written the Rift War series, which turns out to be basically the same storyline as many of the adventure quest movies that you will find in today's society. I love the idea that your book is going to be a film. That's the plus. I like to see people go up the mountain, not go across the mountain.
Yeah.
Sorry, all you're going to do is going to end up on the other side. Now, when it comes to your, let's start with the book. When it comes to your book, what were your goals, and did you have a different goal set from that of the team, the publishing house?
I think our goals were really the same of, we wanted to get the book out as far as wide as we can go. Because I've lived in other countries, one of my goals is seeing it translated in other languages. That's like where I want to see it. Now that I'm like, I want my, Chinese friends to read it, my Israeli friends, my Arab friends to read it. I want my Dutch and Danish and Finnish friends to read it. I want them all to read it in their natural language. And actually they asked me, I had a German friend email me like, when is the German coming out? Well, actually, foreign publishers don't look at your books until they've sold a certain number in America. So I think my publisher and we've had goals of getting those sales and really building the name of the books. And for me, because I really want to see it in foreign countries as well.
I was going to ask, with your language skills, I thought you would have written an additional copy in additional language. That's what I did when I was writing my books. I wrote my books in Norwegian, Cantonese, and I wrote in German and Spanish.
Wow, that is impressive.
Just to repeat the book. Because of the industry, it's wide open, but you don't want to see a computer translate because it misses a lot of the meaning of the culture that you're sending it to. Another thing is, for your film, they're going to use auto-translate. That's not a problem. They're going to have a person doing it. Or they'll have a person doing it. But I would be so interested in seeing your film to do well in all markets. That's what we strive for. My main area is book publishing. I'm an author, 9 books. And I pushed everything of mine. And I'm glad to see a publisher out there that does the same thing. I burned out. I mean, literally for me, I burned out as a publisher because it was just publishing, radio, and handling music artists. It's a big juggle and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But for you, since you're going into Hollywood, my primary thing would tell you is to make as many contacts as you can. And I found that Season Sparks is the most awesome way to do crowdsourcing for a film. I helped
Which,
several Seeds and Spark.
okay.
They're awesome. It's an awesome crowdsourcing platform. They have millions of people, and the same as the one you're talking about, they have investors. Um, Love them to death. They work very well for me when two of my authors became, movie writers, and they still are, and they still use the same sourcing I use. On the other side, what was your first impression of your own book after you wrote it, before you went to re-edit it?
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, see, look, I've been through the mill when it comes to book publishing. I did it for over 7 years. I've done radio for almost 11 years. I was a host for 6 years, general manager, and now owner of 3 networks. It
Wow.
gets wild. It gets crazy. It gets insane. The media is incredible. So that's why I asked, how was it for you when after you wrote the story? Because I mean, I used to write on paper. How
Yeah.
was it for you to re-edit it?
Oh, wow. So I'm not a linear thinker or a linear writer. So that makes my process very non-linear. So, and also that's so funny because I did not do this on purpose, but calculated is a dual timeline. Okay. So it is a dual timeline, past and present. But originally I wrote it out in rough draft form as chronological. And I was like, this is not working. This is not working. And that's when I started to create the dual timeline, which then I told you it took me like 2 years to perfect. And it was, and so when you're working on a book for 2 to 3 years, you eventually hate it. You're like, this is so lame.
Put
First
it
of all, you've
away.
read every plot twist, you've read you've read everything. Nothing can surprise you. So you're like, this is so boring. No one's gonna like it. I just want to, and you just think it's the worst. But that's only because you've been in it for so long, and just perfecting, like literally down to the word choice. Like, is that the perfect word? I mean, that's how meticulous I can get, where I'm like, is that the perfect word to really convey the punch that I'm looking for? Because it really can come down to one word. Like every word, you got to use your words in a powerful way, right? So my editing, man, I was just super picky. I took scene by scene. How can I up the stakes? How can I make this deeper? And then I got, the first time I had people read it, the very first time, going back to what you said, like that first time before you really take the deep edit, where you get it as good as you think you can get it, and then you hand it to people. And that's scary. But it's good at that point. You've done the best you can. And then somebody says, I'm not connecting to your character. And you're like, and so you're like, well, why not? They're like, well, because she has this math gift and obviously all this terrible stuff happens. So she's like cold and I can't connect. So I was like, okay, so how can I change that? So I had to go back and I had to draw out what would make her relatable, what would make her warm. How can we see past what she's been through and those numbers that control what she sees and all the things that she can predict around her? She sees screens of numbers and equations predicting things around her. She's very mathematical and logical. So how can I give her more of a heart? So it's like, and that's why beta readers and having a lot of my friends read it. And I was just like, my friends thankfully are looking to give constructive feedback. What can make it better? Not like, this is terrible, I hate it. No, that's not the feedback you want. You want people to be like, what can make it better? Ooh, what if you did this? What if you added this? What if she could do this? Like, one of my friends was like, I feel like she needs something on her, like a symbol, something that she can carry. And I was just like, well, what would that be? It's just like racking my brain. So it's like, the more eyes you have on a project, and all my friends and family, thankfully, are super creative, like they were showing me different holes in the story. And so I took that, that first draft, and I went and I worked on everything over and over and over.
How many pages? How many
Oh
pages
my
did it
word,
become?
yes. Oh gosh, they're all 400-page books. Calculate it's just under 400 pages, and all the other ones are over 420, 450. I didn't even realize I could write that long of a book, oh man. But yeah, going over and over and then making sure it's seamless. That's something that I really love. And not being a non-linear thinker, I write all of my scenes out of order because I can see all the puzzle pieces. I just don't know how they fit together until I start actually trying. How do they fit together? I'm like, no, that's not right. That's not right. Oh, it fits here. And it's a really weird process, but thankfully I went to New York last month, and I met a bunch of other non-linear writers that have the same process. And it's so fun to talk to people who, we're not just like outlining a story from beginning to end. I always have big picture. I always have all the events, but I have to fit them together. And maybe I am mathematical. Maybe I actually was supposed to be a mathematician.
Yep. Usually the characters written are part of you. Usually the characters written are a part of the being you are.
Yeah.
So maybe that's your hidden talent.
My hidden superpower.
Now, have you talked with your publishers about being seen by the papers? Not talking about, this is one of the things that I have always been a little upset about. They say, oh yeah, we put out this, what do they call it? This thing so that they can recognize you as a writer, proposal, so that people in the newspapers. And I'm like, no, get me on Good Morning America, get me on ABC, get me on something. Have you thought about that path yet? It'd be a great opener for the up and coming movie.
Yes, it would be. Gosh, I don't know. Like, I'm actually not shy, but then when I think about going on Good Morning America, I'm like, I'll totally say something wrong. Don't put me on there. Like, I'm serious. I'm a chatter. I'm not afraid to go anywhere. But I'm just like, I will tell them my personal secret somehow, and the entire couple will know.
I can see it now. Well, I just didn't want y'all to know I was drinking a beer last night. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, the fun thing is that, the more you're out there, the more conferences you go to, the more your experience broadens. Comic-Cons, I love them to death because you get to express and be an experiencer.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new culture.
Yeah. I've wanted to go to Comic-Cons. That's actually good to just remind me of and remind my publisher of. I actually put it on a list. Like 2023 goals were more of those book festivals and maybe even San Diego Comic-Con.
Well, I did years ago, Comic-Con 2014, when I wrote Children of Brawl series, which I placed on hold again because I'm thinking about rewriting the whole storylines, making a second edition to the book. I liked the way it was. It was a great book. It was wonderful. Great sales. That was not the problem. There were some missing elements that I had in it. And it was personal. I mean, and then come to find out, now you got the stones for the Avengers and Thanos. Well, I wrote this story back in 86, before the Infinity Wars. So, bop, thank you, Marvel. That's another one I got to remind my lawyer about. Yeah. We could talk about that one later. But there's a lot of writers keep a collection of writing. And That's what we do. Our stories, our information. I mean, you said you're a journalist. You journal everything. You writing all the time.
Yeah.
I did that at one point, and then I stopped because I got tired of seeing my ideas in somebody's book. And it's like,
Yeah.
hold on, did I give this to a friend to read and now somebody else or something? It makes you wonder. So I stopped doing that because of that finding. But the question I have for you would be, when you write, and you said you're all over the map, and I understand that very well. It took me a while to adjust not to be all over the map. When you're writing, do you sometimes envision your characters and just write as the characters speak in your head?
So I intentionally picture all of my scenes because I do outline. I have a total full outline even before I start writing, even though I'm a puzzler. But I will, because a lot of writing is in our head. A lot of it's us imagining up stuff, and I'm very visual. And
Right.
so if I can sit there and imagine, if I'm like alone, I will sit there and play the entire scene out in my head like a movie. I'll imagine what they're saying.
Got the pen moving.
But my pen isn't moving yet, not until I experience it in my head. I'll experience everything, even the way I feel, like moving in, like I could see the characters, how they interact. And I'm literally watching it play out, and I'm testing dialogue and how it feels. I'm watching it play out. And then if it feels good, I'll write it down. If it feels right and feels good, and I'm like, yeah, that's awesome, then I'll take my pen and write it out. So I write it up here. I experience it up here first, and then I write it down.
Well, see, at that point, sometimes you miss some of the dialogue because when you're going through a scene like just imagination point, you got a story like Bag of Bones by Stephen King. And you're seeing this image, and this is how Stephen writes, by the way, for all those out there. He's sitting down at his desk, and sometimes he's typing it because that's the pace that he types. But most of the time, he has a pad and paper in his hand. He closes his eyes and starts writing. And he hears the people speak. Sometimes, if he doesn't write it, he will miss some of that dialogue.
Yeah.
Raymond E. Feist, the one that created Dungeons and Dragons, Rift War series, he was one of my great inspirers. When I met him at Comic-Con years ago, I almost cried. It was like seeing Stan Lee, okay? I mean, it was literally like seeing Stan Lee. So when you have that kind of love for writers or love for a good journey, a good adventure story, your mind goes blah, and you're just envisioning. And I know your fan base is doing that when they see you right now. Okay, just to be honest, I know they're doing it. The question I will have from that point is, do you sometimes feel like you neglect your characters? I'm going to be honest. Do you sometimes feel that way? Because I know I do. That's why I'm rewriting the story, a 3-book series. I'm rewriting it because I feel like I've neglected something in there. When I talked to Raymond E. Feist a few months ago, he even told me, you know something? I don't like the way I did Janie. I'm like, but Raymond, that was back in 1980s.
Oh man.
No, I mean, I read the entire series. The man has more books than Stephen King. Okay. And it's like, you neglected her. Don't you feel like you neglected one of your characters or didn't give them what they needed to succeed in their quest or needed to finish a journey?
So for my books, I did not hand it in until I felt 100% like they were ready. And that resulted in lots of extensions.
I see what I mean. Yeah, we there.
And the thing is like, I also am a very deep feeler, right? So and I'm working hard, but I need to make sure this book feels right. And for book 2, I had 2 extensions. Book 3, I asked for 5 because I knew it wasn't right. I needed those characters to have every moment they deserved on the page, and it needed to be it didn't need to be perfect, but it needed to feel right. It needed to feel right in me. And thankfully, my publisher was like, okay, we'll give you another extension. And it almost got messy because like I was going to miss my publishing deadline, or like, it was like getting closer to the publishing date. And we'd already set that, but I slipped right in there. And I